Hello guys, today we're going to continue our series of macroeconomic topics. Our topic for today, aggregate demand, aggregate supply. Aggregate demand, very simple, like the demand model in microeconomics, just simple demand curve. But of course, here we talk about the all spending of all goods and services within the economy in a period of time at a given price level. So we're talking here not about one product or one industry like in microeconomics, but we talk about the sum of all spending by consumers, users, government, and exports. That's why you can see the equation for the aggregate demand is similar to what we studied in GDP, C plus I plus G plus X minus M or NX. This is the micro demand curve that we know. The market for one product like iPhone, the price of iPhone, at this price there is a quantity demanded. But in macro, we see the whole economy, like the title should be like the national economy or the economy of any specific country. And instead of the price of one product, we use the average price level in this economy. And instead of the quantity, we use the real GDP or the output, the total production of the country or the real GDP. So we have these four components of aggregate demand. C for personal consumption, the total spending by households on goods and services. I for investments or the total spending by companies and businesses and so on. G for government spending, the total spending done for public services and goods. And finally, the exports minus imports, which is the spending of foreigners or our goods, but we subtract from them our spending to on the foreign products. So we have the net exports index. As we know, there is the demand curve is downward sloping, the same as we studied before, for some reasons like the wealth effects, as the assets start to buy fewer real goods when the price rise. So this is a movement along the curve, upward movement along the curve or downward movement along the curve. So when the price rise, the quantity demanded decrease. When the price decrease, the quantity demanded rise. Or for businesses, when the interest rates or the interest rate effect, as the higher price level also correlate to the higher nominal interest rate, which correlate to the less government gross investments. In this case, when the interest rate is high, so the businesses or investors start to invest less because the cost of borrowing increase. And finally, the net export here, the highest price level mean fewer exports as our products becoming less competitive comparing to other countries. And there's some reasons that may shift the aggregate demand curve to the right or to the left. Here, if there is any change in any of the components of aggregate demand, like C or I or G or NX, if they are increased for any reason, so that in the total or the whole demand curve shift to the right. If they decreased for any reason, the aggregate demand curve shift to the left. So this was aggregate demand, and it's very simple and similar to microeconomics demand curve. Aggregate supply, it's a little bit different because we have two supply curves in the short run and in the long run. In the short run, it's also similar to the supply curve in microeconomics, and it means the total amount of goods and service which all industries and all businesses produced in the economy at every given price level at a particular time. Here we differentiate between the short run and long run. The short run, as we can see, where the economy is functioning right now. Here, this is the short run, the economy in the short run, the supply in the short run. But in the long run, where there is a set amount of capacity in the economy. After some time, there is a limited capacity, as we know, because of the problem of scarcity and limited resources and so on. So there is limited capacity in the economy. So if we say that according to the supply law, when the prices increase, so the supply should increase, but this is not forever because we have limited capacity. We can't increase production forever. That's why after some time in the long run, the supply curve will be vertical like this, or we can say inelastic. Whatever the price increase, the supply will not increase. We can't produce more than our capacity. So how we can grow? Simply if we try to shift the long run aggregate supply curve. How? By increasing our resources, as we will see now. So in the short run, simply there is a movement along the short run aggregate supply curve when the price level increase. The price level here, of course, means inflation. Also at the same time, this will cause the total output or the quantity supplied to increase, which means inflation is good. Yes, in the short run, inflation is good. Okay. This short run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping, as we saw, as the resource prices are sticky in the short run, which means they don't immediately adjust to new price level. What are the resource prices? Like if you are a producer or seller, you are paying rent, you are paying wages for workers. All these things are sticky or constant or fixed in the short run. So your cost doesn't change in the short run. You pay the same wage for many or several months for depends on the contract periods, 1 year, 2 years. You pay the same rent for your workplace for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It depends on the contract. So during this contract period, your cost is the same. The prices are increasing in the market, but you are paying the same wage, you are paying the same rent. That's why the law of supply applied in the short run, as we know, because resource prices are sticky in the short run. That's why when the prices increase, the quantity of output will increase as well. There is some shifters of supply curve in the short run also, like the supply side shocks, which is the factors that cause changes in the cost of production. Here, if there is a cost change for any reason. And so with this shift, the short run aggregate supply curve inward or outward, it depends. Okay, what may change the cost or cause the cost of factors of production or resources to change, like the wage rates, for example, if the government make new law for minimum wage, for example, this may suddenly increase the cost of production by increasing the cost of one of the factors of production, like the labor wages, or change in the cost of raw materials for any reason also, like the shortage, for example, or what's happened like in the pandemic periods. There is shortage in the raw materials because of the lockdown and so on. Change in the price of imports, also the same reason. Change in government indirect tax or subsidies, if the government increase tax or decrease subsidies. All these things may change the cost of production for the producers, and this will shift the short-run aggregate supply curve to the left or to the right. Here we can stop at special phenomena which called stagflation. Here, when the price levels rise because of, as you can see in the curve, if the short-run aggregate supply curve shift to the left, so the price level will rise, which means inflation, high inflation. At the same time, we can see the output Y change from Y1 to Y2, which means the output or real GDP decrease. So we have high inflation and low output. So this is inflation and recession. We call it stagflation. So stagflation, where the GDP is low, unemployment is high, and inflation is high at the same time. This is called stagflation, or simply when the short-run aggregate supply curve shift to the left. Finally, the long-run aggregate supply curve, this inelastic curve or this vertical curve, which we call it the full employment output, or YF. Here, the real GDP that correlates to the natural rate of unemployment or the zero cyclical unemployment, when unemployment rate is around 5%. So regardless of the price level, the economy will produce at the full employment output, as you can see, the change in the price level increase from decrease here from P1 to P2. So this doesn't affect the quantity of goods or services supplied in the long run. Okay, so as we saw, the short run, the supply is sticky, or the price is sticky here. In the long run, they started to become more flexible in the long run. Wages and rent and resource prices are flexible and adjust to the price level. So they was sticky or fixed during the contract time, like this 1 or 2 years in the short run. But of course, they see the prices are increasing around them. Once the contract finish, they will ask for increase in the price, or increase in the wage, increase in the rent, and so that's why the cost of production start to increase again. Here, the long run aggregate supply curve shifts with anything that shifts the production possibilities curve. If you remember the production possibilities curve, here, this one on the right, the graph number B, the possibility, how much we can produce of each of these two products. We have limited possibility. The same is the long run aggregate supply. It is the same as well. As we know, we can't produce outside the production possibilities curve. If we produce inside the curve at this point A, for example, it's inefficient. Producing outside the curve, it's impossible for now. How to produce outside the curve? Which the same answer is how to increase our supply or production in the long run. So changes in the quantity or quality of resources and productivity or technology, this will shift the long run aggregate supply just as they shift the production possibilities curve. We studied in microeconomics how can we shift this production possibilities curve, which means we can produce more of both goods by increasing the quality and quantity of our resources, or increasing their productivity and innovating new technologies. The same also for long run aggregate supply curve. So increasing the quantity, by increasing the quantity of factors of production like land, increasing our land. How increasing the quantity of land? By reusing the unused land in our economy, in our country. So there is some pieces of land are not misused or not used efficiently. So we try to find different ways to use them, to make them useful and productive. Labor also, by increasing the birth rate. So we can find more labor. For some countries, they open their doors for migration from other countries, and so why? To increase labor, the quantity of labor. And capital also by innovating new technologies and maybe importing new technologies or machines or tools or equipments and so on. The quality, if we have more labor, more land, but they are not so productive. So increasing the quality of the land, the same, using our land for agriculture products, for example, for using things like fertilizing and new things to make the lands more productive and more fruitful. Labor by training and education and giving them new skills and so on. So this will increase the quality of our labor, so they will become more productive as well. And capital as well, to use machines, tools, equipments, all this stuff in efficient way, and try to innovate and create new technologies that make our work more productive and more efficient at the same time. Here in this table, you can see summarize of the factors of production, how to increase their quantity, how to increase their quality. You can read later. And here, as we saw, after if we increased our resources, quality and quantity, the production possibilities curve shifts outwards. And also the long run, the same principle can be shown by shifting the long run aggregate supply curve to the right as well. Now, in this case, we have more resources or high quality resources, so we can grow economically. Our real GDP will increase, as we can see from this graph. The equilibrium, if we put these together, is the price level and real GDP, where short run aggregate supply and aggregate demand intersect together. And here we put the three curves together. If you can see, if the quantity or the real GDP is to the left of the long run, as we can see here in this graph, in the left of the long run aggregate supply curve, so the economy here is experiencing a recessionary gap. What does mean recessionary gap? It means it's producing less than its long run potential, producing less than its long run potential. It means we can produce more than this. If we find the long run aggregate supply on the right of these points of production or outputs. Or if the quantity of outputs, which is YE, is to the right of the long run aggregate supply. Here, the economy is experiencing an inflationary gap. Inflationary gap. Okay, so we are producing more than our potential, but this causes inflation. Okay, so the governments, what they should do, they should slow down the economy. And of course, in the first one, there is a recessionary gap. We are producing less than we should be, or less than our potential. So we have to do some actions to increase our outputs. Okay, so here's the long run equilibrium, where at this point, in the long run, the short run aggregate supply, the aggregate demand curve will intersect at the long run aggregate supply. Here, this is the full employment outputs. Okay, so if the economy is experiencing inflationary gap, workers will eventually seek and get higher wages. We have inflation now. These higher input costs, it increases the cost of production, shifts the short-run aggregate supply curve to the left, which bring the economy back to the full employment. And if the economy is experiencing recessionary gap, so workers will eventually accept lower wages because we are now in recession. So people are losing their jobs. So they will accept any low wage. This lower input cost shifts the aggregate supply in the short run to the right, which bring the economy back to the full employment. Okay, thank you and see you next lesson.